Cecilia is our community development director, and she will get that item started.
Okay, thank you. Chair Crandall, members of the Planning Commission, in the interest of continuing to provide the commission with information about the plans and programs that community development works on, that will come across the dais for your review and input. Tonight, as a study session item, we're here to present the local coastal program. This is an opportunity to provide you with an overview of what the local coastal program is. The city of San Clemente has a portion of our jurisdiction in the coastal zone, so we are subject to the Coastal Act. And we thought it would be important to walk you through some of the policies and regulations related to that, and where the city is in the process of getting certification of its own local coastal program so that we can have permitting authority in the coastal zone. So with me tonight is Leslia Meyerhoff. She is the principal with Summit Environmental, and Leslia is our local coastal program manager, and she'll be leading the presentation tonight. And then we also have Christopher Wright. Christopher Wright is our associate planner too in the long range planning division, who's the staff person that helps Leslia and I on the local coastal program. So with that, I am going to cue up the presentation here. All right, and then go ahead, Leslie, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cecilia. Good evening, Commission Chair and Commissioners. I'm Leslie Meyerhoff. As Cecilia said, I'm a consultant or a contractor for the city, and I've been working with Cecilia and her team on the city's local coastal program. It looks like we jumped to slide number 8. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go.
It's a brief presentation, but it's not that brief. So at its most basic, a local coastal program is a local jurisdiction's plan for complying with the California Coastal Act. Next slide, please. The local coastal program, or the LCP, you probably hear that reference a lot, consists of 2 main components. One is the land use plan, or the LUP, and the second part is the implementation plan, or the IP. All cities and counties in the California coastal zone are required to have a certified LCP. At present, the city of San Clemente does not have a certified LCP. Next slide, please. San Clemente has had a certified LUP since 1988. That was comprehensively updated in 1996. And then most recently, we updated the LUP in 2018. As I noted previously, we do not have a complete certified LCP. The city did have a draft IP that was approved by the City Council in 1996. That document was submitted to the Coastal Commission. However, the Coastal Commission made edits or what they call suggested modifications, and those were ultimately not acceptable to the leadership of the city. So that document did not go forward. A new draft IP or implementation plan is currently in progress, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a minute. Next slide, please. So the LCP only covers the portion of the city in the California coastal zone. The California Coastal Act generally defines the coastal zone as that geographic area from the beach landward approximately 1,000 yards. It varies by jurisdiction, but in San Clemente, the coastal zone extends basically to Interstate 5, as you can see in this exhibit. It's the light shaded gray area just inward from the beach. The coastal zone comprises about 15% of the total land area in the city, and it includes 5 miles of coastline. Next slide, please. Also within the coastal zone are approximately 20 acres of public beaches, 15 public beach access ways, and also critical public infrastructure such as the Marine Safety Headquarters, the city's municipal pier, restrooms, parking lots, and related amenities that support the beach experience. So the key city objectives were established at the outset of the LCP update process, and they're listed here. And the main one is to retain local control throughout the city update process. And keeping in mind that local coastal program, the first word is local. So it's been very important to the city to make sure that all the documents reflect the city vision and goals for the community, and that the policies reflect local preferences and the unique conditions that are on the ground in San Clemente. One of the main goals is to provide greater certainty to local property owners and businesses with respect to policies and development standards. And then ultimate goal is that certification will streamline the permitting process, not only for city staff and coastal commission staff, but also the property owners who are doing land development projects within the city. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and Leslie, before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to mention, because the city does not have a local coastal program, we don't have the authority to issue coastal development permits. So applicants have to go through a 2-step process if they want to develop in the coastal zone. They need to come to the city for a permit or approval, and then they need to go to the Coastal Commission for a permit or approval. Once we get a certified local coastal program, we will be the one-stop shop for those applicants.
That's an important point. Yeah. So in terms of what we've been working on over the past 5 or 6 years, the LCP update process was restarted in 2014 following the conclusion of the general plan update that the city undertook. And with the certified land use plan in 2018, that really marked the first significant milestone in the current process that we are in. Following the certification of the LUP, the city prepared a sea level rise vulnerability assessment, and that was completed in 2019 and submitted to the Coastal Commission. You'll hear a little bit more about this tonight in the 7 o'clock agenda item, but one of the major things that we are working on right now is the draft Coastal Resiliency Plan. And we completed the draft of that document in October, just last month. Also, as I noted earlier, the IP or the implementation plan is currently in process. And one other component of the LCP that the city had been working on and will be working on again is a very focused amendment to the land use plan. This will focus really on just one of the definitions in that document. And unfortunately, the city did not receive a favorable review by the Coastal Commission for this effort in 2020. We are currently developing a draft land use plan amendment, and that'll be before the commission probably later, probably actually early 2022.
And Leslie, if I could just step in here and talk about that last bullet point for a moment. We were on a trajectory to get our local coastal plan certification shortly after our land use plan was approved in 2018. However, there was concern amongst property owners in the city that there was a new definition in the land use plan related to what is existing structures and the date for counting cumulative changes to structures over time. In the Coastal Commission's policy and programs, if you made more than 50% of a change to your structure, after you've tipped that 50% threshold, you now have to come into compliance with all of the new code requirements. So we understood that, but the Coastal Commission wanted to change that date for counting cumulative changes to structures back to 1977. And it wasn't something that property owners found very palatable. And we thought administratively it would be hard to track. We asked the Coastal Commission for a change to that date, to the date that the land use plan was certified. The Coastal Commission staff didn't support that, and the Coastal Commission didn't support that. So we pressed pause on all our work on the local coastal program because to us that's a fundamental issue. Recently, we've had some very productive conversations with the leadership in the Coastal Commission, and they have agreed that they will support no date for existing development in our land use plan, and going forward in the implementation plan, they will also agree not to have a date. I think the importance of that is that then we have the flexibility to determine whether or not the certain triggers in the Coastal Act would apply. Sorry about that, Leslie.
No, that's perfect. That's good information. Okay. Once again, it looks like we've jumped ahead. Oh, no, you're right. Slide number 8. My apologies. Okay, so you've heard about some of the key components of the city's local coastal program. One interesting and somewhat unique aspect of the city's LCP is this categorical exclusion order. Very few cities actually have these, and it's basically been in effect since 1982. And the idea here is that there are certain types of projects in certain geographic areas of the city that do not have the potential to result in adverse effects on coastal resources. So because of that, they're basically allowed to have a waiver from a coastal development permit requirement. This document has been in effect since 1982, and it will expire once the city completes the LCP certification process. The goal of the city, though, is to renew this with refined maps and possibly refined policies and other elements of the categorical exclusion order. I think we have a map of this on the next slide. So the area that's in blue is obviously the coastal zone. The area in green is covered by the categorical exclusion area. So if you have let's say a single family project within that green area, you may receive a waiver from a coastal development permit, depending on the specific nature and location of your project. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that map?
I don't think so. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to say about the map?
Just a focus that primarily the areas that are not excluded are bluff and canyon properties, and there are some additional areas, but that's the focus of the properties that are not excluded.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Next slide. Okay. The efforts that the city has been working on since 2014 have been supported in large part by almost $300,000 in grants that were awarded to the city. And those grants have been used for technical resources, technical studies, and they've supplemented the city's direct resources and contributions to this project as well. And I just wanted to point out here that the LCP process, this whole update has really been an interdepartmental effort led largely by the Community Planning Department, but we've also had a lot of really good input from other departments, the City Manager's Office, City Attorney, of course, Public Works and Engineering, Marine Safety, Water Quality, Parks, and Recreation. So it's really been quite a collaboration that we've been working on for years now. Next slide, please. So with this current LCP update, this comprehensive update, some of the main topics of interest, not only to city staff, but also stakeholders in the community and Coastal Commission staff are shown here. And I would say sea level rise and coastal resiliency adaptation planning has definitely been at the top of everyone's list for making sure we've got the right policies in place and also working on the next phase, which will be the development standards related to those topics. As Cecilia talked earlier about the allowance for non-conforming existing structures to continue, that's also a priority issue to be resolved. Defining existing development and determining at what point a structure is considered new development as opposed to existing development. Also, the subject of the land use plan amendment was the major remodel for existing structures. And now, as we've indicated, we're likely to move forward on that land use plan amendment again. That'll be an important topic going forward. Also, rights to shoreline protection for existing structures. That's an interesting and a priority topic as well for the city. And then also the Capistrano Shores community, that was excluded from the 2018 LUP update. And so that community is technically subject to the previous LUP, which was certified in 1996. Next slide, please. So looking forward, the next steps, our main focus right now is the Coastal Resiliency Plan. Again, you'll hear more about this at the 7 o'clock hour. But that document is currently out for a 6-week public review and comment period. We've got about 2 weeks left on that. We do continue to receive comments on that document. We presented that item to the city's Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Commission last month. We're obviously coming back to you at 7 o'clock to talk to you about that document. And then we have the Coastal Resiliency Plan scheduled for City Council public hearing on December 7th. And then per the terms of the LCP planning grant, we are to submit that document to the Coastal Commission as a final deliverable of the grant before the end of the current calendar year. The other related effort we're working on is the implementation plan. Ultimately, that will become Title 18 of the city's municipal code. We are working on a draft as we speak, and we expect to have a public review draft available for you this winter. That may be December or January. That's still being determined. That document will have additional public outreach and community input during the 6-week public review and comment period on that document. And then that is due to the Coastal Commission in March of 2022, also as a final LCP planning grant deliverable. So quite a few things that we're working on going forward. I think that is the last slide. Let's see. Yes, so we wanted to keep it brief. I know we have an hour scheduled for this study session. That concludes the presentation, and we're here to answer your questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do any of the commissioners have questions of the presentation staff? Commissioner Cosmo.
Thank you. Hey, this is a good document. There's a lot of great work. The LCP has huge benefits. I wanted to get a better understanding of the 50-year plan for the sand replenishment, and also just understand what our current thinking is along the eroded parts of the beach line where the railroad is impacted. So could we talk a little bit about that and get kind of the most latest information? I'd like the latest information on the erosion where it impacts the railroad, number one. Number two, the viability of this 50-year sand replacement program. Just your thoughts on that viability. How realistic is it? Is that enough? Should we be looking at all other things in addition to that? Those are my two big areas that I wanted to learn a little bit more tonight about.
Yes, I think the questions that you're asking about focus really on sea level rise and coastal resiliency.
Mhm.
We're going to have a more in-depth presentation on that.
So save
during,
that for later.
yeah, during the regular meeting, and we'll actually
do.
have our coastal geologist as
Perfect.
part of that presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner McCann?
Thank you for your presentation. That was excellent. You answered some of my questions in your thing. So the draft IP has not been, it's not finalized yet. It's still in process. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's in draft form. We had a pretty good draft prepared about this time last year. That internal working draft has been reviewed by Coastal Commission staff. So we've had some early input and feedback on that. As I mentioned, as a result of our disagreement with the Coastal Commission, we put a pause on all of our efforts, but I think we are in a place where we are prepared to move forward based on their assurances. So we're kind of picking up where we left off.
Okay, so who prepared that draft IP? Staff or consultants or?
A combination. So the draft implementation plan, as Leslie mentioned, is going to be its own chapter in the municipal code. It'll be Title 18, and it was a combination of Leslie and Meyerhoff's work. We had another consulting firm, Dudek, helping us with that, but it really is with the oversight of city staff, who are sort of the implementation experts when it comes to the implementation of the land use plan and codifying those policies into regulations, but also taking those existing regulations that we have in our municipal code related to coastal development and putting them into Title 18.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Why was Capo Shores excluded from the update?
Yeah, so that's, it's kind of an interesting history. Capistrano Shores has sort of presented the Coastal Commission with a unique set of circumstances. Because we don't have authority to issue coastal development permits in the coastal zone, Capistrano Shores has to go to the Coastal Commission for any kind of development that they want to do on their property. The other interesting thing about Capistrano Shores is because they're manufactured homes, they also don't come to the city for building permits. Building permits are issued by the state, and it's the State Housing Community Development Department. So, there wasn't a lot of sort of authority or jurisdiction the city has over Capistrano Shores. So from the Coastal Commission's perspective, and ours, it just seemed better to keep them subject to the old land use plan and regulations rather than tying them into our new regulations that wouldn't be applicable anyway.
Right, that makes sense.
And then at some point in the future, the idea is that Capistrano Shores, to the extent that they want to perhaps redevelop or make some comprehensive improvements, that they would do that under a master coastal development permit that they would get through the Coastal Commission.
Okay. When will the draft IP be available for the public to see?
Leslie, I'll let you take that one.
Okay, we have a call on that next week. We're looking at December to January. Probably, if I was a betting person, I would say January of 2022. And again, that'll be for 6-week public review and comment.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of people that would love to have a certified LCP, myself included, but the devil's in the details and making sure that it's, at a minimum, not unfavorable to our residents and property owners. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes along.
Yes, and we would appreciate when it is out for public review, everyone to go through it with a fine tooth comb. And before we present it to the city council and after the end of the public review period, we'll be bringing it to the planning commission as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
No further
Okay.
questions.
Commissioner Prescott.
Can you give me an example of the shoreline protection? Would that include private homes, erosion?
Yes, that's correct. So there's a provision in the Coastal Act that says that existing development shall be protected, and it allows what are called shoreline protective devices, such as seawalls or revetment, to be able to protect someone's property from erosion and sea level rise, the rising waters. There's been some evolving policies from the Coastal Commission over time as to what has rights under the Coastal Act to have those shoreline protection structures. They think it's everything that was built before 1977. We think it's what's existing on the ground today. Leslie, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, how does the certified housing element fishtail or dovetail into this?
So that's a good question. The housing element is consistent with the coastal land use plan. So when we drafted the housing element, we did it with our already certified land use plan in place. There shouldn't be too much there shouldn't be any inconsistency, and there is overlap to the extent that in the coastal zone, we are looking to intensify more areas for residential development. That is one area where we would have to look at some competing policies. For example, the Coastal Commission wouldn't want us to take away visitor serving commercial or visitor accommodations in the coastal zone. But if we wanted to add housing, there's not a conflict, but a discussion that would have to happen so that we'd have to develop the right balance between those two.
Okay, and then this may be for Chris or maybe city attorney. With all the mandates coming down from the state for ADUs, et cetera, within the coastal zone, we've got string lines and setbacks requirements from the coastal canyons and all. Do we know how that is coordinated yet?
Chris, do you want to take a stab at that?
Well, currently, the state law does have a carve out for the Coastal Act. So the Coastal Commission is currently giving us direction that they're going to be reviewing ADUs in the coastal zone. So, and we're continuing to have a discussion with them about that. Because our understanding is that if ADUs meet the terms of our exclusion order, then they should be able to be permitted by staff consistent with state direction to expedite housing under that ADU ordinance that the state passed. So, but in regards to the implementation plan, we'll have to have an ongoing discussion with the Coastal Commission staff and how what coastal specific standards should make its way into the implementation plan with regard to like coastal canyons and bluffs and policies that are tied to protecting sensitive areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from staff at this time? I see none, so thank you very much, Cecilia, and is it Leslie?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Very good presentation. Any chance we can get a hard copy of the presentation?
Of course, yes, we will. Get you-
Anyone want one to at least get the requirements in line?
We can do that.
Okay, we'll request on our own then,
Okay.
those. So we will close the study session. And thank you very much. We have no recommendation at this time required on this, so thank you again. And everyone, remember your mics will stay live during the break before the planning commission meeting. Thank you.
I think we just get the PowerPoint emailed to us. That's
Yeah, we
Great.
can do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anybody would like one, just email me.
okay.
Well, we can just send it out to everybody.
I've got a couple of them.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
since I'm already, you know, Okay. Let's call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of San Clemente, Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 meeting. Commissioner McCacken, would you please do the pledge?
Sure. Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adam, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Prescott Leffler,
Here.
Commissioner McCacken,
Here.
Commissioner Cosgrove,
Here.
Commissioner Camp. Commissioner Camp is absent. Chair Pro Tem McCann,
Here.
Vice Chair Tyler,
Here.
Chair Crandall.
Here. The next item is special orders of business and special presentations. We have none. We have 4 sets of minutes to approve. The first one, A, is the minutes from the regular study session meeting of September 22nd, 2021. We have any changes or a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Prescott. Do we have a
Sure, a
second?
second.
Commissioner McCacken?
Chair, can we propose to approve all the minutes with one motion?
As long as there are no changes. I suppose we could do that.
I'll amend my
Let's amend the
motion.
motion. Do we have any, first off, do we have any changes to any of the minutes that are before us today? No, okay. Would you please amend your
I'll
motion?
amend the motion to include A, B, C, and D with the minutes for regular and planning.
Motion by
Second.
Commissioner Prescott
And I'll
and
second that.
second by Commissioner McCacken. We will do a vote. Commissioner Prescott,
Aye.
Commissioner McCacken,
Aye.
Commissioner Tyler.
Aye.
Commissioner McCann,
Aye.
Commissioner Cosgrove.
Abstain. I wasn't at those meetings.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Crandall is also an aye. The next item is oral and written communications. Members of the audience may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and not otherwise on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please step forward to the microphone, and if you desire, state your name and or city of residence for the record and make your presentation. Please limit your presentation to 3 minutes. Eileen, do we have any speaker cards? We have no speakers, so the next item is the consent calendar. And we have one item with two parking changes to it. And
Chair Crandall.
Adam, would you like to make
If
comment
I
on
may,
this,
sir.
this item?
The consent calendar tonight consists of one item, is the proposed parking prohibitions on North El Camino Real and West Avenue de Santiago. Our staff is present to answer questions related to that item. I recommend that we find out if there are any members of the public that would like to speak on this item or call it up. Otherwise, it's up to the commission whether to remove it from the consent calendar and consider it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call it up because I know there's been some letters coming around on this, and I'd like the public to have the opportunity to hear the correspondence we've had. So I will call it up, and could you read the public correspondence first, and then we will open it for public comment also. Are there any members here that want to speak to this item? Okay, I see none. So if you could just read those into the record, I would appreciate that.
Okay, this first written communication comes from Chris Garcia. He writes, "To whom it may concern, I am writing on behalf of my family who owns the property at 1100 to 1104 South El Camino Real on the southwest corner of Santiago and El Camino Real. I am concerned about the proposed red curbing at the top of Santiago. While I do believe there should be a red curb buffer at the top of the street on the south side, I believe it is unreasonable to extend that red curb 40 feet down from El Camino Real. This effectively eliminates almost 2 full curb parking spaces. The north side of Santiago has been a red curb for as long as I can remember, until the new building was completed. This street is highly impacted for parking because there is no street parking on the northbound side of El Camino Real. Parking has always been a problem for our building because patrons and employees of the businesses on the northbound side of El Camino Real park on Santiago while visiting and working at those businesses. Additionally, if there is a safety concern for visibility of traffic on El Camino Real from Santiago, the bigger issue is with the palm trees that are planted along 1002 to 1010 South El Camino Real, coupled with the street parking in front of those buildings, which creates a real visibility problem when trying to see southbound traffic along El Camino Real from Santiago. I don't understand how extending the red curb down the south side of Santiago 40 feet from El Camino Real provides relief for the visibility, makes the intersection any safer, or widens the street significantly to be of any benefit. I believe a red curb on the south side of Santiago should be no more than 15 feet from El Camino Real, with red curbing along the entire length of the north side of Santiago from El Camino Real to the alley. I oppose this plan as proposed. Thank you, Chris Garcia." And this written communication comes from Emily Matthews. And she writes, "I like the proposed plan for no parking areas. This will make it safer to exit Santiago. Thank you." Those are the only 2 written communications that we have that are clearly indicative of wanting to be read into the record. I do know staff has had some communications with other interested members of the public, and either Saida Farivar or Zach Ponson with Public Works could expand on those comments if the commission would like it.
Okay, I would like to ask either Zach or Saida, Has your recommendation changed at all, having heard the communications to you from what we have in our packet?
I'll go ahead and answer that. Zach Ponson, Acting Deputy Public Works Director. Mr. Crandall, no, we have not changed our recommendation as a result of the public comment. Staff is still recommending miscellaneous red curb on the north side and codifying the 40 feet of red curb on the south side of Santiago.
Very good. And you're in concurrence with Saida, both of you?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Do we have any discussion
Mr. Chairman.
or a motion?
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to read in the record that I visited the sites today. And it appears that the curb red line there is pretty faded on Santiago, but it looked, I measured off as best I could. It seemed like it was close to 40 feet now. So I think it's just codifying it. I don't know that it's changing it. Where we're really adding red curb is on the other side for 10 feet where it curves into the alley, which is very appropriate. The other site is to add some about 40 feet of red curb on North El Camino Real, which is where our businesses are located, and that will remove parking. I spoke to the shop owner who will have the red curb directly in front of his shop. And he said, I'm glad the city's doing this. It's very unsafe. I personally have lost a mirror off my car, and I've seen many other accidents or dings because El Camino Real is very narrow here, and it doesn't widen until after where the red curb is proposed to end. So he's in support of it, even though he's going to lose a spot right in front of his store. So I think the staff has done a good job at determining where red curb needs to be added for safety purposes. So I will be happy to support this and with a motion when the time is right.
Okay. Do we have any other comments? A motion would be appropriate.
Okay, great. I move approval of the moving or forwarding the recommendation of the city council to prohibit parking at the following locations. Number 1, North El Camino Real, east of Avenida Posada for additional 40 feet. And number 2, Avenida Santiago on the west side of a property's driveway exit located at 1010 South El Camino Real for a distance of 10 feet. And B, Avenida Santiago from the southeast curb return of El Camino Real southerly for 40 feet.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Cosgrove. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McCacken. We'll have a vote. Commissioner Prescott?
Could we open it for discussion before the vote?
Certainly. I thought we were in that, but that's,
Well,
yes,
it went
I-
pretty fast,
I'm,
but now that
apologize.
we're officially in it.
um,
I did also go to the site today, and there does seem to be a faded red curve there. It already does seem to be long enough. Parking is very limited, and to take another site away, I think, might be a disservice to that area. It's a heavy street full of parking. I have no objections to the El Camino side, but I just want to make sure we're not taking 2 spaces away. On the, is it Santiago? Is that the way you pronounce it? Just
it would be
thinking-
Santiago, yeah.
So is it full 2 spaces, or would it just be 1 space?
Zach, do you have a response to that?
So the agenda report does say 1010 El Camino or Santiago. So both the red curbs at the Santiago locations are being proposed on the Santiago frontage. So there might be a typo in that report that actually says 1010 Santiago. So that address is referring to 1010 El Camino Real. To answer the question though, the red curb that is proposed is replacing the existing 40 feet that's already there. That's red. Some of it has been faded out and it appears as though it's been painted over at least once. That red curb has been in existence since at least 2007, but just not codified. That 40 feet will be about 2 cars worth. But currently, there's been red curb there for at least the last 13 years on and off. And we're not sure who's painted it red. We're not sure who's painted over it. But it will, 40 feet does equal about 2 cars length. You're correct.
So Zach, just to be clear, there's 2 car lengths on that side, which is basically already that curb was there for over a number of years and been painted over back and forth, because you can see that. Across from that red curb that would be painted, is there another red curb? That's my confusion. On the north side, which doesn't exist now.
Saida, do you remember the other side that's just east of the new Santiago building?
So the other side is already red curb. We're not changing anything. We're just proposing a 10 feet red curb on the west side of the building driveway located at 1010 West South El Camino Real. So on the north side, we're not touching the existing red curb. We're just red curbing the 10 feet curb on the west side of the driveway.
Okay. The one that's kind of white and kind of red now.
Yes, yeah, it is red now.
If I could, there's now a building there with a driveway. So after the red curb that's there now, there's a driveway. Then there's 10 feet of just regular curb where it curves into the alley. So that 10 feet where it curves into the alley, that's where they're proposing to add red curb.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an extension to the fuzzy red curve that's somewhat there now, and then it goes on to
The fuzzy red curb, as I noticed, was on the other side.
on the other side. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Now.
And that to my knowledge isn't changing length. It's just codifying it.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Cosgrove, and I think Commissioner McCacken had second, so we will call a vote on that. Commissioner Prescott?
Yes.
Commissioner McCacken?
Aye.
Commissioner Tyler?
Aye.
Commissioner McCann?
Aye.
Commissioner Cosgrove?
I,
And Commissioner Crandall is also an aye. So we will be moving that along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is oral and written communications. Members of the audience may address the commission on matters of public interest that which
Chair.
pertain to. Yes,
Chair Crandall, the oral and written communications, we've already covered.
you are correct. Thank you very much. We are on to public hearings, excuse me. And we have no public hearings today. So we're on to new business, and this is the draft coastal resiliency plan presentation by Cecilia Gallardo-Dali. Are you ready and prepared to start?
Yes, thank you. Chair Crandall, members of the Planning Commission, Cecilia Gallardo-Daly, Community Development Director. With me this evening is Leslie Meyerhoff. She is our local coastal program manager and consultant to the city. She's been working with us on all things coastal for the last 4 or 5 years. And then also we have Jake Thickman. He's a coastal scientist with Moffitt and Nickel. We're going to be giving you a presentation tonight on our coastal resiliency plan. And I am going to open up the presentation right now. Get started. Okay, all right, Leslie.
Thank you, Cecilia. Good evening again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to be here tonight presenting the city's draft coastal resiliency plan to the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. The Coastal Resiliency Plan is a part of the city's local coastal program. Because it's part of the LCP, the objectives for this plan are very similar to the objectives for the other components of the LCP. The Coastal Resiliency Plan is a document that includes both short-term and long-term actions to improve coastal resiliency in the city in the face of future sea level rise. The Coastal Resiliency Plan includes programs and projects for consideration for implementation. It also provides the city with a menu or a toolbox of projects and programs for the city to consider implementing. It also importantly builds on the 2019 sea level rise vulnerability assessment that the city completed. It is really a phased approach to sea level rise adaptation planning for the city. And it's just important to note that the sea level rise vulnerability assessment, as well as the coastal resiliency plan, are very far looking documents. The sea level rise document looks out to the year 2100. This document doesn't go quite that far out. And so it's important to just keep in mind that this is not a static document. It will need to be periodically reviewed and updated as conditions warrant, both in terms of changes to the beach and changes in sea level rise. With that, next slide, please. This part of the presentation is going to be handled by Jake Thickman, the coastal engineer.
Hi, everyone. I do apologize. My webcam is not working today. Otherwise, I'd be able to meet you face to face. But yeah, so I'm going to give a quick overview of the sea level rise vulnerability assessment and the resilience plan. The vulnerability assessment was completed in November 2019. The goal of this study was to identify the risks and hazards to city resources from evolving conditions due to sea level rise. As Leslie had mentioned, it does look very far into the future, the longest time horizon being the end of the century in 2100. And to cover the potential sea level rise scenarios, we looked at 3 different scenarios that incorporate lower end projections, as well as the low probability, high projections all the way up to the end of the century. So those are illustrated in the graphic on the right side of the slide. So we looked at 0.8 feet or 25 centimeters up to 3.3 feet and 4.9 feet as a high-end projection for the end of the century. So in the initial vulnerability assessment, we wanted to identify which assets and resources were at risk and at what sea level rise threshold they became at risk. The primary hazards we looked at in the city, shoreline erosion is by far the more important hazard. We also did look at flood projections. Next slide. So for the resources that we found to be at risk in San Clemente, there was a general pattern at that lower sea level rise scenario. It was more about the current risk would be exacerbated. There would be a little bit more shoreline loss. 3.3 feet is when threshold was reached where significant areas of the beach would be reduced and things would be back up to the rail corridor without adaptation measures. And that final scenario we looked at is where we were required to look at the case where the protection wasn't in place. And so bluff erosion became an issue at that highest sea level rise scenario. So that general pattern along the city shoreline impacted several types of resources, from public beach area and recreation due to loss of sandy beaches as water levels increased. Coastal access ways, primarily under the 3.3 foot scenario, will become impacted as the water stretched back to existing access points. Beach structures and amenities experienced increased exposure under the lower sea level rise scenario, 0.8 feet. Many of these structures and amenities currently experience coastal hazards from erosion or wave action, such as the North Beach restrooms or the Marine Safety Headquarters. Railroad operations, with the loss of beach area due to higher water levels, increased wave exposure on the revetments that protect the current railway are projected, which could lead to increased flood risk, or even in certain spots, increased erosion from the backside of the structure where there's a stormwater outlet. The municipal pier and the pier bowl area also suffer due to the loss of beach area. The access point and the tunnel under the pier potentially becoming flooded with 1 meter of sea level rise and just loss of sandy beach area around it with the lower scenario. So that, you know, as the slide mentions, this does kind of incorporate all resources seaward of the bluffs and especially seaward of the rail corridor. The bluff top development, that really only became an issue when we made the assumption that the rail corridor would no longer be currently in place. It currently acts to protect the toe of a lot of the bluffs. So under the high level scenario where we did look at that potential for the rail corridor to be removed, that would cause additional risk to bluff top development. Next slide. So as part of our recommendations from the vulnerability assessment, we recommended that, you know, as Lizzie mentioned, that for this document to evolve, it would be useful to have, you know, site-specific information on sea levels via a tide gauge, potentially at the pier, as well as to conduct shoreline profile monitoring in spring and fall to capture seasonal variation so that you could have a baseline of conditions now to compare and monitor to quantify physical changes, not only from sea level rise, but any adaptation measures that are taken could be evaluated for effectiveness, identify these long-term trends, and then you could, you know, have that kind of phased approach moving forward so you can implement projects and programs as they're needed. And our final recommendation, which, you know, which we worked on, was to prepare this coastal resiliency plan. Next slide. So as part of the plan, we did want to highlight the ongoing resiliency efforts in San Clemente, one of which being the annual winter storm Berm program that is established from November to March to protect against increased wave energy in the winter months. This is a 2,500 foot long structure, usually from Linda Lane to T Street, done at a low tide where sand is piled up to perform a, you know, a temporary seasonal barrier and prevent waves from impacting landward resources. There's also the ongoing Marine Safety Headquarters Facility Resiliency Study to address site-specific hazards for that facility. And the largest program would be the Army Corps Long-Term Beach Sand Replenishment Program. The pre-construction engineering design has been completed for that project. This is a large project to place sand between T Street and the Marine Safety Headquarters. I believe it's around 250,000 cubic yards. That will happen periodically moving forward, designed to nourish the shoreline and maintain a 50-foot width with renourishment every 5 to 10 years. So funding is currently being considered for that project, and State Parks is on it as a continued cost share partner. Next slide. So in our draft coastal resiliency plan, we wanted to build on the findings of the vulnerability assessment and make recommendations on the types of adaptation measures the city could look at moving forward. So we came up with a range of locally preferred adaptation strategies, some of which are a living shoreline concept, establishing a sand dune system along the shoreline to help retain that sand. This could be combined with, you know, retention structures that provide multiple benefits, such as you know, buried cobble berms to provide additional protection as part of that living shoreline system. We also included more traditional sand retention structures, such as groins or breakwaters, just to provide a wide range of options for the city, as well as examined establishing additional sediment management practices to keep the beach width in place as sea level rise. So for each of those preferred adaptation strategies, we looked at potential implementation timelines that would be informed by the monitoring program. We also looked at the benefits and costs of each type of adaptation strategy, additional information on the necessary permitting that would need to happen to implement the strategy, recommended agency coordination, and identifying several more specific next steps associated with each strategy. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it back over to Leslie.
Thank you, Jake. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get the input of the Planning Commission, as well as any members of the public that are present tonight. As we mentioned earlier, we are still in the public review period on the draft plan. We will continue to take comments until November 18th, at which point we will start to finalize the plan for City Council consideration. The cost benefit analysis that Jake mentioned, that's an important component of the plan for any of the projects or programs that the city moves forward with. And the thinking here is that each one of these efforts is going to require a significant investment of funds, public funds. And so we need to make sure that there is a positive rate of return on any investment going forward. Once that economic or cost benefit analysis is completed for individual projects and programs, that will help the city qualify for funding from various entities, grant funding and other types of funding. So that's an important consideration going forward when you're looking at implementing some of these projects. Also, continued regional coordination and state and federal coordination is very important part of this plan. Of course, we all know climate change and sea level rise are not local or unique to San Clemente. So it's important that we work with neighbors to the south and neighbors to the north. Next slide, please. So the Orange County Transportation Authority did complete their own sea level rise vulnerability assessment late last year. We participated with that entity as stakeholders at the table. So we were involved in that process. And then California State Parks continues to be a grant funding partner for the city for the 50-year Army Corps project that was mentioned earlier in this presentation. We're also continuing to coordinate with Dana Point and the County of Orange. There's several opportunities and projects potentially going forward there that hopefully will sort of begin to emerge with ongoing discussions and collaboration with those entities. And then to the south, the folks at Camp Pendleton, we've really just been data sharing with them and keeping them in the loop on the status of both the vulnerability assessment and also the coastal resiliency plan. And we've asked them to share their data and information with the city as well. And then last but not least, non-governmental organizations or NGOs and academic institutions. Those folks all have a seat at the table. They're all stakeholders who are actively involved in the project and the plan rather. And we will continue to, keep dialogue with all of those folks, and anyone who wants to be a part of the process is certainly welcome at the table. Next slide, please. So where we go from here? Again, November 18th is the last day for public comments on this document. We've already presented the draft plan to the city's Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Commission. That was agendized for last month. Obviously, we're here tonight to receive your input, and then the next step would be to take the revised plan to the City Council December 7th. We will then finalize the plan and submit it to the Coastal Commission before the end of 2021. And I believe that concludes the presentation. And thank you all for your time tonight. We're here, both Cecilia and Jake and myself are here and available to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is an informational item and no actions being taken this evening, but I do think I'm going to invite the public to make comment. But before we do that, does any commissioner have questions for the staff putting on the presentation? Commissioner Cosgrove, you started us off earlier this evening on it. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. First question is, did the Beach and Parks and Recreation Committee have any recommendations or additional things that they wanted to see or do?
Yes, they did have a recommendation, a couple of recommendations for the record. Leslie, do you have those readily available?
I don't have the document readily in front of me, but I can tell you generally what their comments were. The high level comments were that the city should consider establishing a shoreline monitoring program for each spring and fall. They should also consider installation of a tide gauge at the city's municipal pier. And then also that we would take a look at a cobble berm type concept in the southern part of the city. And that is what you would consider a nature-based solution. And that would be in conjunction with the 50-year Army Corps project. So to retain the sand that would be placed on the beaches to make that project function more effectively, more efficiently as well by keeping the sand in place. And then kind of bypassing it to the north, on some intermittent basis so that the sand stays within the city's shoreline.
Excellent. Can somebody characterize our current situation with respect to the loss of shoreline? And in particular, are there areas where we've lost the beach entirely? And also, what is the impact to my understanding is that the railroad stopped operation for a few days because there was concern for safety that the support for the track was being compromised. Can somebody just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I can address the situation briefly. This was in the southern part of San Clemente in the Cypress Shores area. There has historically been a beach in that location. It's a private beach, but there's been a beach between the shore and the railroad revetment. Over time, that beach has eroded away. We had some very heavy surf. I think it was back in late August, early September. And that surf was and has been right up against the railroad revetment due to the loss of beach. As a result of those, the accelerated or extra wave action during that period, in late August, early September, some of the revetment was washed away. That area is also the location of an ancient landslide. The toe of the landslide is underneath the revetment. So with the sand gone and some the revetment displaced, the ancient landslide was reactivated. And that movement caused a misalignment of the railroad tracks. So MetroLink and Orange County Transportation Authority did have to halt rail service while they corrected the alignment. First, they added more riprap to shore up the revetment and then realign the tracks, and rail service has resumed.
Are there things that the city should be doing in that particular area to provide additional protection?
So it's not city property.
Okay.
And it's not a public beach. So, our authority or our jurisdiction
That makes
is
sense.
limited.
Yep. Okay. The other question I have is in regards to the sand replenishment program. There are some critics that say it's really a Band-Aid. It doesn't really work over time, that sand will just be washed away again. What are some of the strategies that we could be looking at? I guess that's why I asked what the Beach Commission, because they apparently did make a recommendation relative to that. Are there any other strategies that we should be considering to support that sand replenishment to make it more effective?
Leslie, I'm going to let you and Jake field that question.
Sure. Yes, the Beaches and Parks and Rec Commissioners did make a suggestion to explore the concept of living shorelines or sand dunes, a sand dune network that is integrated into the riprap. So the riprap would sort of be the landward side of that, and then the sand dune system could be integrated into that. Sort of like the concept in Cardiff, if you're familiar with that, the Living Shoreline Project between Encinitas and Solana Beach in San Diego County. So it's an idea that's gaining a lot of traction elsewhere in local jurisdictions because, again, it's a nature-based solution. You're trying to replicate sand dunes that were once actually on the beach that served both to protect the shoreline and obviously provide habitat and keep the sand there in place. So there's things like that, plus the cobble berm concept that can keep the sand. But, you know, and Jake can speak more to this, but what we're dealing with in this littoral cell, which starts in the north part of San Clemente and goes all the way to La Jolla Canyon in San Diego, there's a 30 million cubic yard deficit of sand. And that's based on a study that Sandag did some years ago. But they've quantified that there is this significant shortfall in sediment reaching the shoreline. And so we do have to tackle that issue of how do we get more sand to the beach or more sediment. The County of Orange, I believe it's close to a decade ago, prepared a regional sediment management plan. We've been talking with Orange County Parks about updating that plan and trying to identify sources of sediment that could be recovered and placed on the beach if they're, you know, compatible and suitable according to EPA guidelines and Army Corps guidelines and others. So there are a lot of different ways to come at this problem. And I think we're, you know, this plan tries to sort of put them all on the table and leave the city with options for going forward and not strapping you into one action or the other, but really letting the city determine what the best path forward is. Jake, is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think you covered it really well, Leslie, and you know, you made the point that there just kind of is a pattern of erosion within the littoral cell. So sand will move down the coast just due to the nature of the oceanographic patterns within the littoral cell. And so absolutely, you'd want to try to keep the sand in place as much as you can, but do that in the most compatible way as well. And I think that's why we've kind of tried to make the plan fairly broad so that all the options can be on the table to find the best solution going forward.
Okay. I mean, it just sounds like a very challenging situation where we're trying to deal with global environmental factors as well as the impact on us locally. And it seems to me like this is something that's going to be ongoing and also important that we figure out an ongoing way, not to, I like the recommendations that you guys have to monitor, and the tidal gauge and all that is great. And I support all the things that I heard. I'm just trying to think if there's additional things we can do to be learning, study, you know, from other geographies that have addressed this and find innovative solutions that we just aren't aware of. Because we're not the only ones dealing with this in the world. And it just seems that it does present a danger to our community in the sense that what we consider to be walkable beaches now may not be the case in decades ahead. And the steps we take now could slow it down or even mitigate it to some degree. I also want to have the record reflect that we do have concerns expressed to us from the Surf Rider Foundation around protecting our reefs and making sure that whatever we do with the sand replenishment doesn't negatively impact the reefs that provide part of what is known as the San Clemente surf community's world-class surf conditions that we have. So I would like to make sure that, you know, we are responsive to those concerns as well. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McCann.
Thanks. I just had a quick question. I know you said it, Jake, but I didn't quite hear. Who's paying for the sand replenishment? The Army Corps?
Yes. So I think, Leslie, I don't know if you can speak to the specific funding, but I know it is an Army Corps project.
Yes, the Army Corps, the cost share for that project is 65% federal from the Army Corps of Engineers. The remaining 35% is the city's obligation. However, the state parks is picking up 85% of the city's 35%, if that makes sense. And then for the renourishment cycles, it's sort of, I believe it's a 50-50 state, local, and federal.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions? Commissioner McCacken.
If you look at table 4-1, page 16, I think that's informative. Although you do have to go in and read several pages to find out exactly what's affected by those heights. And I think it would be very much more revealing to the public if there was if you look at figure 4.1, something a little bit more specific that shows what happens at 0.8 of a foot and 3.3 feet and 4.9 feet, with some other geological features like the cliffs, so that at what point, at what particular area, is affected, because 4.1 doesn't really give you the amount of information that I think probably we do have that shows how far, a certain elevation means. And if we have that, I think it would be important to include it, because it would be more educational to the public. This is a difficult problem because if you think about it in geometry, you're working with the height of the ocean, the distance that it could travel, and time. I think for immediate, for the near future of time, I think the sand replenishment program and the winter sand berming is very important, to our #1 recreational asset, and that needs to continue. As we go farther along, I agree with some of the stuff that the Surfrider Foundation says, but they also have to realize that height and distance over time, their wave action is going to change, because there's a difference in the wave, the height of the seafloor and how far you are from that bottom floor. So it's going to change too. So they obviously don't want that to happen, but there is going to be some change, in the wave action. But I don't agree with their discounting of the immediate, the more recent, the first column of somewhere under 0.8 of our sand replenishment program and the winter sand berming. It's really going to be a continuum. It's not anything that's static. I think when we had the Coastal Advisory Commission, together, we had similar ideas of having, GPS analysis of the sand so that where there are choke points that are really bad, and always looking for sources, and the gauge, the actual way to measure, because it is going to be a problem again over time of what's really kind of occurring. So those would be my only comments. I think you could probably have a better graphic that actually would show the public what it means: 0.8, 3.3 feet and 4.9 feet. So they wouldn't have to necessarily read, 10 pages or more to actually find out what's, threatened, because at 0.8 feet, if you read in there, it talks about the pier being threatened, water inundating underneath the pedestrian bridge under the railroad tracks. But you have to go in there and read it. I think there could be a graphic that could show it, that would show that a certain, color, you can really show the damage that can happen over what period of time. Even though they do say 2040, 2050, that's, not too far away. But again, depends on our polar ice caps and our greenhouse gases. So those would be my only comments. Otherwise, I think this is very important, to the city.
Thank you very much.
Can
Commissioner Prescott.
I just make a comment on that?
Oh.
Commissioner McCacken, thank you for the comment that you made about the graphics that would show what those levels of sea level rise would mean to San Clemente. This coastal resiliency plan builds off of the sea level rise vulnerability assessment. So there are some figures in that document, figures 1921 and 23 that actually show what's impacted at 0.8 feet, what's impacted at at 3.3 feet and what is impacted by 4.9 feet, but we can do a better job of making those illustrations clear in the coastal resiliency plan, so you're not having to go back and reference the other document to understand what is impacted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Prescott?
Can you identify, you mentioned Camp Pendleton data. Can you identify what type of data? Is it included in this packet?
The data, actually, we've been data sharing with the folks at Camp Pendleton. They have not, they're not working on a sea level rise vulnerability assessment or resiliency plan. To my knowledge at this point, we've just kept them informed with all of our draft deliverables and public noticing and our early efforts to get this plan moving forward. So does that answer your question?
I guess what I'm looking for, are they contributing, you mentioned the data, excuse me, are they contributing anything to this plan as far as data?
Not directly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tyler?
I actually have a question off of that. Do you know, are the state parks collecting data within like the trails, San Onofre Trails system, which is technically on the Camp Pendleton land?
I'm not sure if they are or not. Are you talking about like users and visitors and population counts?
Or just any of the data related to the shoreline issues?
I'm not sure. We could certainly find out and follow up with you on that.
And then my last question is on the historic and cultural resources. It mentions that there are 4 recorded archaeological sites near the coast. I'm assuming those would be impacted by the sea level rise. And if so, will those be impacted by any of the mitigation efforts? You know, will they be covered by the sand dune stuff and things like that?
That's a good question. And for any of these projects or programs that we're looking at that involves construction, so to speak, we would be required to do environmental impact analysis under CEQA and possibly under NEPA as well, depending on the location and scope and partners and permits. So absolutely, those resources would be evaluated with respect to potential effects and ways to avoid or altogether avoid or mitigate impacts on cultural or tribal cultural resources.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm going to open it up for some public comments. We've received 2 cards. The first is Susan Ambrose. And Eileen, will you keep talk on that? Thank you.
Good evening, planning commissioners. It's nice to see you this evening, and I'm so glad that you're discussing this topic. Coastal Advisory Committee has been redacted, if you could say, or it's no longer a live committee in the city of San Clemente as of August 31st. I was a former chairperson of that committee and sat on that committee for 11 years. We worked very hard on that committee to work on coastal issues, to work very carefully on the sand replenishment project and any kind of other issue that would be coastal related in any way. And I don't know how many of you know that Gary McCacken over here knows his stuff very well, having learned a whole bunch from us on Coastal Advisory Committee for a couple of years where he served, and he was a great servant there. He's going to do you well on planning as well. I'm here to tell you that I'd like you to go down, if you have time, to North Beach and see what's happening with the building of the sand berm that they do every winter. It's really a wonderful thing for you to see, to actually realize how this is put together to create this winter berm. So if you could take the time to go right on the side of Ole Hansen Beach Club, just go down the park in the parking lot and walk through that. You can see how contiguous the hills are being made after they're bulldozed up from the beach. And it's amazing to see all of the artwork. Literally, it takes somebody who's got a lot of knowledge to put these hills together, these dunes, to have that safe protection for the back berm there. Now, I was told by the maintenance supervisor just the other day that I spoke to from the city that it's going to go from North Beach all the way to the end of Calafia, the San Clemente State Park, the winter berm. And so that's something that we should be paying attention to. Talk to your friends about it. This is another positive thing that the city is doing to retain and protect our beaches. And the more we do that and the more people know about it, we have to retain our sand. For example, this is a beach town. The businesses here, I mean, the community here, people move here because of the sand and the beaches and the clean water and clean beaches. If we didn't have that, we would not have the San Clemente that all of you are living in this community for. You would lose so much of that appeal, and the economy would be just so directly affected by the loss of tourism for our city and town. And I can tell you too that the shoreline project, Congressman Levin has entered our project into the federal government appropriations bill under water. And we should know by the middle of February if we will get the $9.3 million funding to help finish this project. So let's keep our fingers crossed and think positively about the kinds of things that we're working on to have them to be done. I'm getting beeped. Thank you for your interest in this process and in this project.
Susan, would you wait just a minute? I wanted to thank you for your time and all that you've spent volunteering for the city and working on this issue, but she is a wealth of knowledge. And does anyone here have a question for her? We don't normally do this during public comment, but
I'd be happy to.
Yeah,
Commissioner Cosner.
I'm just still looking for more proactive things we can do. Are there things that we should be doing that we're not doing, or recommendations that we need to be bringing to the council for them to consider? I'm looking for as much input as we can to give the council as much guidance as possible.
Well, one of the things that we recommended from last year, and I don't know that it ever got to the city council, we had a fellow consultant, which I'm sure Cecilia and Leslie, both of you know, Chris Webb, come in and talk to us about regionalization of sand replenishment types of projects. How do we get sand? How do we get the sedimentary sand that you're talking about, Leslie, to come to our beaches, or to even get the sand? How do we even apply to get the sand? So he was showing us how the sand has been lost through several photographs he had through his history and his experience. And we were quite moved to say, yes, let's look into regionalization. That's something that we all agreed on. And Gary was there to have a presentation made to the city council to consider looking at this. I know now that the county has gotten a grant of about $214,000 to actually set up a regional committee, and there is one now forming. And we're happy to say from our committee, I recommended Doreen Campopiano to be that representative on our end, our coastal advisory member. Now, since we've dissolved, she has gone on to be a commissioner in beaches, parks, and recreation. And I talk to her weekly and remind her of all of these other things that we're trying to squeeze in. Of course, we only have 2 seats at the table of a group of 7 that are coastal related. So they have to be very careful about prioritizing those things. However, it's not lost. I mean, we've worked very carefully on, and Doreen too, from our comments from Coastal Advisory, has advised Cecilia and the team, Leslie as well, about those 3 recommendations that we've made that are really important for the resiliency program. When you think of sand replenishment, it is the next hand, they're hand in hand with coastal resiliency. So you made a comment earlier, Commissioner Cosgrove, about can we get together with other people? I know that our intention was to get together with Sandag to get educated as to what they're doing, to talk to. In fact, I participated myself in the programs that the county had when they suffered such severe erosion between Capistrano Beach and Dana Point at state parks even. So that erosion, and that all went to Coastal Commission, and they're still working on those projects and kinds of things that they can implement to hold on to the sand they have. I'm sure that's many of you, if you did that drive this summer, you saw those enormous looking white barrels that they looked like they had some texture around them. Well, those were called sand cubes. So they would disintegrate and the coating would disintegrate and go into the sand, and then there'll be bulldozers coming along, et cetera. So those were efforts to just keep the sand. There's a lot of preventive things and being in, and I like that word proactive, and we used it a lot of times in coastal advisory. It's hard to get a city to agree to things that aren't necessarily seeable right now. We can try to be as proactive as we can. We can make recommendations, but you know, the city staff here are excellent people that we have here know that you have to have some facts to back up where you think this is going to go. So it's all in timing, and it's all in kinds of things that we're trying to accomplish and protect from the city. Our city council is fully aware that our beaches are the backbone of our economic viability. So there, I think that this city council is very willing to listen and to participate if you go in there prepared,
Great.
just like these ladies have.
Do we have any other questions from commissioners?
I'd like to
Thank you.
invite you at any time to contact me. I can give you my phone number, my connections here, because I no longer have a city number. Bart, if you have a question for me, you can, would that be okay with you, Bart?
Certainly. Thank you, Susan.
I'll pass that on to Bart. So if you have a question about some of these things, there's so many things that I know that to isolate in some minutes, just fragments of minutes would take up probably the next 2 hours at least, but and I've been thrown out for talking less than that. So because you know, you can go on and on and on. And those of you, if you live here, you know, I mean, you can just, if you could start at North Beach and just walk the coastal trail, just for example, if you allow me just another minute and a half here, I was just telling Gary, I'm sorry, Commissioner McCacken here, that I just first saw the beach in front of 204 and 206 and North Beach. North Beach, yes, I've seen it before because I'm a long time resident, as you can probably tell. But at 204 and 206, when you go down those stairs to the beach, you are right there on the rocks in the water. There is no sand to jump on to go out to the ocean. However, these past couple of days with low tide, it's an amazing shot. And again, if you could take 15 minutes out of your day and go down there, you can still park at North Beach and do the walk. It's not probably 5 minutes and you're there. And it's an amazing sight to see, because what you will see on the sand are enormous rocks that in regular tide, you don't see them at all. It's awesome. If you can picture that in your mind, it's worth the 15 minutes to go down there and say, holy cow, look what's happened here. We've lost this beach, essentially. I have been walking by and a surfer waved his hand to me and said, can you help me get out? And I said, you're going to have to swim south. You know, find the current and swim south, because no, there's no way to get out, because those rocks are in front of and are siding up to the staircase. It's just that's all gone. So
Okay.
I mean, and that means in regular tide, but in low tide, you can see them, but that
Thank you
doesn't
very
happen very
much.
frequently. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Next, is it Aaron?
Yes.
And if you could give your last name,
I'm Aaron Washington. I'm here
Washington.
as just a resident, not as the commissioner of Beach Park and Recreation, but I do sit on that commission.
Welcome.
And thanks. I went to the city council meeting in October, and two of our council commissioners was Joreen and Ben. They gave, I think that's the time that she had. They gave a presentation. Don't worry, I'll give her one of my minutes. They gave a presentation on what we were just talking about. Ben is an expert at it, and he was very passionate about what he was putting out. And he was basically, I'm gonna summarize, he was saying that just putting sand on the beach won't be enough, that we have to anchor it in some sort. And he was talking about vegetation and dunes. And he just had the council members all engaged, and they were really locked in and really interested. So, I mean, that's not going to be a selling point, but I like the part where you said the cost benefit analysis. We were talking about that. And also, I was more wondering what you all were thinking, like on collaboration. I did 35 years in the Navy and a lot of it overseas. And with our LCACs and our LCUs, we do a lot of beaching events. And we always survey the beach layout and stuff and where we have to make it where the LCACs and get the Marines on the beach. So I know they do a lot of that. They like to train them up for those type of events over there. Are they doing anything like that along our coast, especially at ACU 5 down south where the LCACs come up? Are we just tapping into that source or with the Coast Guard? Let's see, I covered that. Ben, let's see. Yeah, so building, what Ben was saying, yeah, we build a shoreline naturally with vegetations and dunes and anchor it. But he was using some examples down south and all that. So I think he's a good source. If you guys want to have an expert come in and just kind of give a brief on that. I mean, we're learning a lot from him. I'm an engineer on the electrical steam and gas turbine by trade, but this got me listening and loving it. So thank you for your time. She can have my last 1 minute and 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Donna Vindrins.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Donna Vidrine and I'm a San Clemente resident. And my only comment tonight is you ask what we can do proactive with recommendations to City Council. I would say recommend that we have a committee similar to the Coastal Advisory Committee, 7-member, call it the Coastal Advisory Committee, call it the Climate Change Committee. But I really think we need a group of individuals with expertise that are focused on coastal issues, on what's affecting our city, and working with making recommendations to City Council, working with Planning Committee. So that's what I would recommend for your recommendations to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other discussion from commissioners?
Sure.
Commissioner McCann.
I guess I have one more, which is, you mentioned in the presentation that you talked a little bit about bluff top erosion, but that was dependent on the railroad going away. The railroad line acts as a defense against bluff top erosion right now. And I know that, I'm not sure if it's in this report or in a different one where it talks about bluff top retreat rate. If you look at, if there's studies that have done about the bluff top retreat rate at like Camp Pendleton, where there's no improvements, there's no collecting of drainage, water that, keeping it away from the bluffs and so forth. I think our bluff top retreat rate would be much slower than something like that, especially if the railroad is going to be there, and it's hard to foresee a future where the railroad is not there, kind of anchoring the bluff. So I would just be a little bit leery if that line of thinking goes down the road, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, very good. I'll send it back to Cecilia.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that. I'm glad you picked up on that there's a scenario or an analysis without the revetment, and that was required by the California Coastal Commission. We pushed back on that because we didn't think it was something that was reasonably foreseeable, but they had us do that analysis anyway. And then I also wanted to just mention that we did receive a comment letter from the Surfrider Foundation. The author of the letter asked me to make copies for you all. So I left them all for you on the dais so that you'd have the benefit of that information, and we'll be providing it to the City Council as well.
Cecilia, if I could just follow up one additional point on the railroad alignment. The OCTA in their sea level rise vulnerability study from late last year identified their preferred solution for the railroad and revetment is to keep it in place and essentially harden it with larger size rock or riprap and widen the crest of the alignment. So their plan is to keep it there and essentially just to strengthen it. They looked at alternative alignments and undergrounding, but in terms of their cost benefit. I don't think the other scenarios panned out. So you're correct that we did have to look at that scenario, but we now know that that railroad is likely to remain in place.
Yeah, and then on the Orange County Transportation Authority study, we did submit a comment letter because we thought that sand replenishment was missing from that as a possible solution to help protect the railroad line. And they added something in there in their study. They acknowledge that while they do not control any of the beaches or sand areas, they recognize that as a tool. And we certainly think that it provides us with an opportunity to partner with them on some sand replenishment solutions that'll protect their infrastructure as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have no more discussion. We will close that item. We are in new business, and I have one item that I would like to add is we are becoming critically low on planners at the city at this moment. And I would like to see if we can have a discussion item on the next agenda or a new agenda where we can discuss what we can do to impress how important it is to have adequate staffing to review these projects and make sure that things are done in a timely manner, because we've got some big projects that have large requirements for staff time and doing the packets that we receive. And I think we should take a look at that and see if we can assist in any way we can to make sure that those spaces are filled in a timely fashion. That was the only comment that I had. Our next item of business is old business, and we have none. Are there any reports from commissioners or staff at this time? Yes.
Chair
Mr.
Crandall,
Crandall.
I've got a couple of announcements, but I'm willing to wait if there are any commissioners.
Anyone have you've got the floor, Adam.
Okay, so the first item is just a heads up that on November 30th, there will be a joint council, commission, and committee meeting that the meeting commences at 7 p.m. Going to be down at the Wedgwood facility at the municipal golf course. I will be providing additional information about this, as well as the next agenda will be including an adjournment to that meeting. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it at this time. And then one other item, if anybody or for anybody watching the council meeting last night, there was some robust discussion about SB 9 and the direction on that ordinance. The council directed staff to bring them an urgency ordinance on the December 7th meeting, and to as well as a previous direction to provide an update by legal counsel on SB 9 at the November 7th or November 16th city council meeting. This does not preclude the planning commission's ability in the future to review SB 9 regulations, but due to the timing and the need to adopt something prior to January 1st, we need to have the planning or the city council effectively lock in our ability to further regulate it in the new year. So we will be providing updates as that occurs, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that the SB 9 regulations will be presented to the city council on the December 7th meeting.
Okay, very good. But just a heads up, I am going to be out of town on November 30th. The joint meeting with all commissions and city council is a social meeting, but they do call it to order and usually introduce each other to the council so everybody knows them socially. So Commissioner Tyler will be the representative for the chair at that point. They usually ask for an update on what we've been doing over the last year since appointments. I may go to the previous city council meeting and do that under new business. So that doesn't fall on your shoulders for your first time to that
I
meeting.
appreciate it.
But we will be well represented, but I encourage everybody to go. It's a great get together. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Prescott to adjourn to the November 17th, 2021 meeting at 6 p.m. at the community center here, second by Commissioner McCacken. We will take a vote. Commissioner Prescott,
Yes.
Commissioner McCacken,
Aye.
Commissioner Tyler.
Aye.
Commissioner McCann.
Aye.
Commissioner Cosgrove.
Aye.
And Commissioner Crandall is also an aye. So thank you, everyone. That was very informative on the beach issues. So.